Well, welcome back. This is the Saint and the Singer. He's the singer, and I'm the saint. I know I didn't reverse. You like that?
Whoa. Is that what we're doing in the new year?
I don't know. I'm just trying something new.
Cool.
We have, and this has been.
He's
the youth
neither.
pastor.
He's neither the saint or the singer.
I just wanted to say that I bought.
He's the singing saint. I bought
7 pounds of beef fat and 7 pounds of pork fat for us to grind up in our deer meat whenever we come to that point. But we need to get together and do that.
We'll do that.
He's going to be very sad when he finds out that's what I did this weekend.
I still have 3 to do, so we can all get together and.
Okay, that works. I've got some recipes to share with you.
Thanks. Anyway, that's all.
All right,
Bye,
bro.
guys.
All right. See you, bro.
Shall we restart all of that? Are we just gonna leave?
Yeah, just leave it. Whatever. This is the life of a full-time banker, a full-time farmer. Is that what you call it?
A full-time pastor, part-time farmer.
Yeah, that, and then whatever
And
else we
full-time
do
family
around
man.
here. It's like you're never able to do any one thing. And in my case, you're never able to do any one thing well. But anyway, yes.
Jack of all trades, master of none.
Something like that. This is our first episode of the year.
Yes.
And it's been a really cool year of 2024. But I'll be honest with you, I'm glad she's gone.
Yeah.
And so our church family is doing the Bible recap this year. So we're reading through the Bible from page 1, skip a few pages, go back to page 12, go forward a few. We're reading the Bible in chronological order using the Bible recap app. And so Shaun is pastoring us on Sunday, and he is preaching on the week's reading. And then we are...
Sorry about that. It's attached to the hallway.
And wow. And then so I thought that we thought that for the podcast, we would kind of further the Bible recap thing and maybe do the weekly discussion questions for the reading. So if you're following along with us at church or at home and doing the Bible recap, we're going to... Last week was week 1. You preached on the Genesis portion of week 1, and then we're going to talk about week 1 questions from the weekly questions group conversation on entire Bible Tara Lee Cobble discussion guide, the Bible recap.
That was really robotic. Did you go AI for a second?
I think I blacked out. Anyway, we're using the Green Book, which is weekly discussion questions, because when I get up at 6 o'clock every morning and go down to the sunroom and have my coffee, I am using 4 books already, and I didn't want to do this one too. So we're going to do this one. So I guess all of that long, stupid thing of me talking with words was to say that the podcast is also going to follow along with the Bible recap for the next 12 months. So each week we're going to discuss something about the weekly reading. And so I felt like, since I do the blue book every day, and those questions are very specific to each reading, and I don't think we could get through those in 30 minutes, we would do this one, because this is more of a summary. So
yeah, and so to kind of give you a heads up, if you've never done the Bible recap, you can look it up online, and you get a digital copy or printed copy of the reading schedule, or you can also go on your Bible app and go to plans and look up Bible recap, and then you can access it from there. Most of our churches doing it via the Bible app. Also, there are some discussion videos that Tara Lee Coble will talk about, 5 to 8 minutes about the particular passage. Most passages are between 3 and 4 chapters.
Yeah, so far it's only, I think
we've had several 4 chapters.
Have there been 4 chapters? Job's is going to be.
There are a lot of 4 chapter ones, but
are you like me? Do you find it really hard to get through some of Job? Like, I struggle with just dude, we get it. We don't need 40 chapters of you belly aching. I mean, I know we do, and I know the purpose of it, but when you're in it, it feels like such a slog.
I think Tara Lee Coble made a very good comment in one of her videos about Job. She's like, that she knew, and I forget who she said this, but someone said, you either read and stop before Job or after Job.
Yeah.
You don't want to end in the middle of Job.
Yeah.
What I've been doing when I've been reading Job is I'm looking for signs of the Messiah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so far, I've seen at least two very verbal, acknowledgments of the need for a coming Messiah.
Yep.
The coming Messiah.
Yep.
And I also really enjoy just reading his friends, idiotic, snarky, and often horrible ways to give advice to a person in suffering. So,
but like the rest of us, their advice is like peppered with good
there's
thoughts,
truth in it.
and then it's like, oh boy, here we go.
Yeah, there are hints of truth in what they are saying.
Yeah.
But they are extrapolating things that they don't know, and they're trying to point out what they think Job's sins are, which is really, I'm really enjoying Job's snarky comebacks because he's not really pulling punches. Like, oh, you're so wise, huh?
We got great friends. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so yes, Job has been a little bit difficult, but I like it better when it gets to the God versus.
I was going to say once God starts talking, I'm back in on Job. But some of it's like it almost feels like this meeting could have been an email.
Yes.
Kind of.
Well, and it's definitely if there was any chapter in the Bible that would make you want to take up drinking.
Yeah, that
I think Job and Lamentations would probably be the two, and Ecclesiastes.
Yeah.
Those three books would be ones that are like, oh my goodness,
Yeah,
this
but
is
they
so.
don't drone on for like 40 something chapters. That's the difference. This
Well,
one just
yes, but it is poetic prose, and
no. And I acknowledge, and I was talking to somebody at work about this today too, and it's like, I get it. If I were Job, I'd be 10 times worse than Job is because I'm kind of a Eeyore anyway, but I don't want to sit and read it.
I don't experience somebody else's depressed.
Yeah, I want to talk about my junk, not his. All right, so we're in week 1, which has basically taken us from Genesis 1 to Genesis 11.
Yes.
And then Job,
which is
1,
just when Abraham,
right before Abraham comes,
basically
on
when
the
he's
scene,
born,
right?
Yeah.
So, and then we're in Job 1 through. I'm trying not to think about what I read today, which was week 2, so 16. So if you're just following along and you want to you want to push pause real quick and read the weeks, it's Genesis 1 through 12 and Job 1 through
11.
Oh, sorry, 1 through 11, and Job 1 through 16, and pause. And now we're back.
You should be done by now.
Okay, so these would be the questions from the Green Book for week 1.
Okay.
Have you looked at these?
Not a clue.
Okay, I'm hoping you can answer most of them. All right, so question number 1.
This could be like a game show.
This one,
Answer every question with a question.
Yeah. Here, let's see if we can do the Socratic method here. This one I think is a good question, and I feel like I have thoughts on it, but I want to see what you think. Why do you think God gave us 2 separate accounts of creation, Genesis 1 and Genesis 2?
Okay, so Genesis 1 is the pullback overview of all of creation. So day 1 dealing with the light and dark, all the way through to day 6, the animals and man. But the second creation, the chapter 2 creation, is a snapshot, is really the microscopic details of the 6-day creation. So it's really just zoning in on what was it about creating man and animals. And so that's why there's a focus difference there.
That's exactly what I was going to say, actually. It's like the first read through is you're standing on top of the mountain watching it all happen down here, and then in chapter 2 you get to be standing right there in the midst and seeing it in detail when it's, like you said, it sort of focuses on the creation of man, and then for me it's sort of an emphasis on this is special.
Yes.
And then, literarily, the Jewish writers, the Hebrew writers, really love repetition to bring home a point that
very true.
Pay attention. If you go back to
Well, the Gospel of John would be an example, using the
Right.
7 I am statements.
Right.
He's using this repetitive idea to make a point of the divinity of Christ. Well, Moses is using that same kind of, poetic speech to really point down that the creation of man is much, much more important than the creation of the
all the
stars
rest
and the
of that
moon and the
stuff.
universe. That this is the pinnacle of creation. This is the high point. At this point, everything else is downhill.
Yeah, and I love what Tim Mackey says about this sort of thing, like in the literary style, especially in like the poetry, and then when he wants to, like when Jesus wanted to emphasize something. If you look at the language there, the way that it's set up, it's like the word is said twice, and that makes it's basically like multiplying the importance of the word. So I was going to say in the Old Testament, or not the Old Testament, sorry, the King James version, where Jesus would say, "Verily, verily,
Verily,
I
verily.
say unto thee," or something like that. That's sort of a play on that same deal where, in Hebrew, when like the Shema is listen, it actually says listen, listen,
Yes.
because that means this is important.
Shut up, open both your ears,
Yeah.
follow along.
And so to me, I like your analogy. I kind of look at it cinematically, like the camera is way off in the distance so that you can see the whole sort of size of creation on day one, and then it kind of zooms in to the creation
2
of
hours
man.
earlier, and it shows.
Yeah, and it's almost like a flashback.
it is a
to
flashback.
This was the like you said, the pinnacle or the ultimate piece of creation. So yeah, we don't really think about that too differently. Assuming we agree that God is the creator of all things, do you view the creation narrative as literal, allegorical, or a general reductive summary? How, if at all, would your faith be impacted if you found out you were wrong in that particular view and that one of the other views was accurate instead?
That's a loaded question. I actually
want to break that down and make it one question at a time. So,
Yeah.
Assuming God's creator of all things, do you think it's literal, allegorical, or general reductive?
I am actually going to go with literal, and the reasoning is because the time frame is using the sun's rising and setting, so it is making a literal day kind of mentality.
Devil's advocate, day one is night and day, but the sun and the moon haven't been
It doesn't see
invented yet, haven't been created yet. So
Yeah.
what does that mean?
That one is at that point they're using an allegory, kind of a metaphorical part, but later on because he knows what's coming.
Yeah.
But he's making it very clear. He's saying in one day, and I hear arguments. Well, God could have done it. What's called the evolutionary theocratic evolution and things like that, and all of that. But
Where he kind of sets it in motion
Yeah.
and just lets it go.
or there's the very long, every a day is 1,000 years, kind of thought. But here's my issue: is that if God can do all of these wonderful miracles, why can't he create the universe in 7 days? My God is big enough to do that.
True.
And I do believe that when you look at creation as a 7-day miracle, or 6 days of actual and a miracle, that he is setting up exactly how we should rest. So there's so much more also teachable things inside that versus if it was over billion or 4.6 billion years or, thousands of these years or whatever. I believe there's a lot of evidence to support a young creation. And I think there's more and more evidence. And actually, I think there's more support for that than for an evolutionary kind of practice, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And in my studies also.
I'd say personally, I'm kind of a little bit of all of them. I think I would actually look at part of it being literal, less so much allegorical. I lean further towards the general reductive, but I don't think my faith would be impacted at all to find out I was wrong about that,
No.
because I don't think that it matters.
No, because at the end of the day, God still created it.
What matters is that, right, God created it. I could be persuaded that it was 6 24-hour days like you. I think God, I mean, the picture I always have of creation is God speaks and planets are formed. So any being or entity or person who can do that can do whatever he wants to, whenever he wants to. And for me, if I think about the general, reductive, or allegorical side of it, we've talked before about God's actually outside of time.
Absolutely.
So if it were allegorical, it would be because we don't understand the concept of being outside of time. So we'd have the people who passed this story along for generations and generations would have really no context for how that works. So I'm willing to admit that it could be any mix of all three, and I really don't care. I know there's a lot of people who may feel differently about that, like it's super important that it's got to be 6 days, or it's super important that a day is 1,000 years, or whatever. But for me, I look at especially the creation narrative, and the Bible in general is not a textbook. It's not a science book. It's a spiritual book. And so for me, the big question in the Bible is not how did God do it, but why did God do it? So if you are hung up on one of those answers and it's got to be this answer or nothing, I sympathize with you because I'm that way about other things in the Bible. But for me personally, it wouldn't affect me whatsoever if Jesus walked in the door and was like, dude, I was there. It was whatever, 144 hours or whatever a whole week is. It was literally 24 hours a day, 6 days, and then 7 days of rest. I'd be like, good, sweet, cool.
It's a miracle.
Really, that's pretty impressive, Lord. And if he said, nah, that's not how it worked, it was completely different, I'd be like, cool, God, that's impressive. That's awesome. I mean, the fact that we're here right now as a product of creation is a miracle no matter how it happened. But I'm able to make that mental leap. Sure. And I just, for me, that's not a salvation issue.
It's absolutely, and I would say the same for me, is it's not something that it's not a hill worth dying on.
Right.
I do think that there are some important truths that we can take, and we have to be careful that we don't, reduce everything. And that's where I think there's kind of you got to keep that intention.
Yeah.
But again, it's not something that
again.
I know. It's not a hill worth dying for me.
Right.
And I'm okay with having conversations with people that are on the opposite side of that, and we having discussions the same way, in Revelation, when you're talking about pre-awe and post-millennialism, Right. I'm okay with having those discussions because
you could look at it, and there's reasons for you to believe each one of these categories to be true. There's absolutely reason that you could read that and go, that is absolutely literal, or it's absolutely allegorical, or it's just general reductive. There's any number of reasons for you to feel that way, and I think that's okay.
Right.
When God says, "Thou shalt not do something," then we don't have a whole lot of room to go,
that is prescriptive.
Do you really mean that? But it's a beautiful narrative, however it really happened. Yeah. In my opinion.
Yeah. And one more thing I would say is, no matter what you believe, you have to believe that God is the institute and the instigator of creation.
Okay. So this may take longer than we mean to, but
we may not just get to the book.
I'm in the middle of the Joe Rogan interview with the Matt Huff, who is the evangelical apologist, and he's right now where he's kind of like laying it out. But they were talking about the Big Bang and and how all this stuff happens and all, and Joe says something to the effect, with peppered in with some colorful language, that we're supposed to believe that all this started from something the size of the tip of a needle, and it just all of a sudden, poof, it's everything. And nobody,
that takes more faith than believing in God.
And nobody, but here's my thought. and it came to me while I was listening to this, and I wish that the guy had actually said this to Joe, which I don't think he did, but it's like the only explanation for that to really be true is when God speaks the word to do it.
Correct.
Because, the assertion is there's nothing there, and then all of a sudden everything's there. So God, let's say there's not anything there, and then God speaks the word and everything's here. That would explain a Big Bang, and it would be impressive. We've seen.
I had a shirt in high school
Louis
that said,
Giglio thing.
"I believe in the Big Bang." God said "bang" and it existed.
Yeah, and Louis Giglio says something similar to that and indescribable. I mean, if the God of the universe speaks words and suns come out of his mouth, that would be a pretty big bang.
Yeah.
And that just seemed, that seems very reasonable to me, that if you were working yourself way backwards in a scientific method and you're attempting to explain how this happened, what better explanation than there was nothing and then God spoke the word and everything was here.
Right.
So I don't know. That may not mean anything. I'm not an astrophysicist or a quantum physics person thing. I don't know anything about it, but it works okay in the movie I see in my head. Okay, so how does it feel to be pursued by God in the midst of your sin? Is it scary? Is it comforting? Is it threatening? And why?
I can see why Adam and Eve would be scared. First off, this was the first time that they had ever disappointed God. And I think that if I was in their shoes, I probably would have been in the same situation. But once...
Wait, they didn't have any shoes. They were naked.
Well, no, they made some.
Yeah,
Or
they weren't. But
they made little fig leaves for...
At that point, they didn't have any shoes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Standing in their dirt.
Sorry. Sorry.
They're sitting in their footprints. Nice. But I think that once face to face with God and having the opportunity to experience God's amazing grace, then there would be only, awe and love. But I could see before knowing how God is going to respond, fear would be a natural. Because God did say, hey, dude, you touch it, you die. It was kind of a, black and white there.
I'm just going to say humbling.
Well, I would think that goes.
That after everything you say,
yeah,
right.
That wasn't one of the three options, though.
I don't care. I think that in the stream of things, there, right after what you say, it becomes humbling.
Yes,
and you realize that. Oh,
yeah,
okay, and that's all I got to say about that. Well, we may not have time for this. What's your perspective on the sons of God?
All right. So is it the Nephilim? That's the question. There is a belief that the sons of God is another name for fallen angels or angels. And there is some historical support for that through other scripture passages, and especially for the Hebrew. It would help to make sense as to why God felt the need to flood the whole earth and empty out and restart. Because if there are, these
they're like a created divine being.
Yes.
So they are the fallen angels, and they're the ones that are still there. They're all the Elohim, basically.
Yes.
So the multiples of
They're
divine creations. Yes.
So they're kind of a bad blending of genetics.
Yeah.
That would need to be cleansed.
Yep.
So I would say I believe that the sons of God was actually referring to angelic beings that were, chasing some tail, so to speak.
There's some parallel there to the Greek and Roman pantheons as well.
Oh yeah,
With
the demigods. Which could
etc.
make sense that because it talks about how these became heroes of old, so to speak.
Yep.
So if the stories were passed down through Noah and his children, they would have known these people, and they would have told those stories. Well, let me tell you the story about your great 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 uncle, something, whatever. and how he did all these great things.
He was 8 feet tall.
Yeah,
And, blah, blah, blah.
and he threw a mountain. So
Okay. We'll switch gears to Job
all
now.
right, okay, Job.
Does suffering confuse you like it does Job? How can you tell if you're being punished, disciplined by God, you experience an attack of the enemy, or it's just a natural part of life's hard circumstances?
Whew, there is no way you can answer that question in 4 minutes.
I can. I would say 90% of it is just natural part of life being hard because we are a fallen world, and a good 5 to the rest of the 10% might be an attack of the enemy. I'm not sure that I believe, and I know we are disciplined by God, but I'm not 100% sure it's the way it was in the Old Testament. Like, I know we deal with the consequences of our actions.
Sure.
They're stupid actions. We're called to repentance through the Holy Spirit, but like physical suffering and that sort of stuff, for the most part, I mean, if I believe anything other than it's part of the fallen world and hard circumstances because we screwed up, then I start going down a rabbit hole of God's causing suffering, and I don't believe he really does that.
I will say 2 opposite scriptures to speak to this. One, when Jesus is talking about the blind man, and they ask whose sin was, and he goes, "It wasn't anyone's sin; it was to bring the glory of God."
Yeah.
So on that one,
I forgot to add that there. I do believe there's some of that. I think we've seen some of that here.
So I believe that there is times where God allows suffering to happen to bring His glory. On the flip side, there are also times where you have Paul that talks about taking away this thorn in my side, and God allowing the thorn to stay for whatever, again, for His glory.
Yeah,
there are two opposite situations.
He's
there.
not being punished though.
No,
he's not being disciplined, so to speak. It kind of goes back to the same thing for His glory, because men would look at Paul and go, whatever it was, whether we can always make some sort of assumption. Nobody knows, but let's say it's a really bad stutter.
Yeah.
Then they're going to look at that and look at his performance and go, there's no way that he did this on his own. It has to have been because of the power of God. And I that's a wonderful purpose for that. I would go with that being part of it.
Yeah.
As well.
I think we do have to recognize that we live in a fallen world.
Yep.
And so here's the thing, because we live in a fallen world, other people's sins will impact us. So if I am driving and a drunk driver runs through a stop sign and, heaven forbid, seriously injures me or my family, I'm not saying that God caused that, but the fact that sin exists in the world causes that.
Well, that other person's sin.
Right, absolutely.
So sin still affected you. It was just someone else.
But I'm just saying, I'm not saying that God necessarily said, you know what, right now I'm going to have
Let's smash
Shaun,
these two cars together. Yeah.
But are there times where God's going to allow that to happen? Now, here's the thing, though. I believe that in Romans, it's very clear, God will use all for His glory. Yeah. So He can use that car wreck and bring about a glory that we cannot begin to imagine. The same way with Job. When you complete the story of Job, it goes back to the glory of God. Yeah. And honestly, it's the friends of Job that don't understand, that have this very simplistic idea that if something bad is happening to you, it's because God is punishing you.
It's very black and white. Yeah.
And so this is really what all of Job is about, is that just because bad things happen to you doesn't mean that God is just putting his thumb on you and holding you down, saying, you know what, I don't like you right now. Let's go ahead and smite you. Okay. In fact, it wasn't God that did the smiting. It was the accuser, Satan, that did the smiting. Now, did God allow him? Yes, but with boundaries. Yeah. There was a leash. He was not allowed to take Job's life. Now, there was a long leash, don't get me wrong, 10 kids, thousands of cattle, and his, physical health.
Pretty rough.
But there was still boundaries.
Yeah. Okay, so we're at the 30-minute mark. There's 3 questions left. We're going to call this the lightning round.
Lightning round, okay.
The lightning round. All right. Job believes God is ultimately sovereign over both his troubles and his hope. Are these things hard to reconcile? Why or why not?
that God is both sovereign over his troubles and his hopes.
Yep.
That is not hard for me to reconcile at all because God is sovereign, period.
It's not hard for me to recognize because I'm old. And I think the older you get and the more experience you have, you see that.
Yeah.
When you're young, you don't see it as much because you haven't been through as much. But eventually you've been through enough stuff that you can look back and go, whoa, God has taken really good care of me even in these really terrible times.
Sometimes the best care he takes is in those times.
Right. He is sovereign over all. So, no, I do not find it hard to reconcile. At 18, I would have.
Sure.
Do you find it challenging to sit in silence with people in their pain? Are you inclined to try to fix the problem? What approach do you appreciate most in your life? I'll go first. Yes, I do. And the fact that we have a podcast probably speaks to the fact that we have a hard time being silent ever.
I can sit silently. I do want to fix it.
Oh, I gotta fix
it. But I am very slow to speak in those situations. Oftentimes, the first thing I'm going to speak is a prayer.
Not this guy.
And the only reason is because as a trained counselor, I've had to have the training to do that.
I'm more of a, let me tell you what you need to do.
Yeah, I would prefer to hear and allow them to process first.
Yeah. That'd be the smart thing to do.
But again, that comes from age and from, enough times of screwing it up and saying things I probably shouldn't have.
I would say, again, I do find it easier, but still not easy. Okay, what's your favorite thing to read about God's character in your God shots from the week?
Well, I think for me, I'm loving to see Jesus mentioned in Job when he specifically is asking for a mediator and a redeemer.
Yeah.
And then looking back, having hindsight, we can see Jesus is both the mediator and the redeemer that Job desires in his grief and in his sorrow. And it is the same mediator and redeemer that all of us in our grief and sorrow must cling to.
I'm not going to be able to top that. All right. Well, hey, that's it. That's the recap of the Bible Recap Week 1. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your support. Now would be a good time to say, if you're following along with us, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Yes.
We'll be updating this weekly as long as I don't lose my mind, which might happen.
It's a short trip for him.
It is a very short trip. So stick with us. We're going to do this all year long. We're going to get into some really good stuff, and we're going to probably have some interesting conversations at some point. So
I'm sure there'll be some tougher ones.
This has been The Saint and the Singer. That guy right there is the saint.
And that guy right there is the singer.
Thank y'all.
See you. My name is Shaun Courtney. I'm the pastor at Connection Point Church, and I would like to offer you a big welcome to come join us on Sunday mornings for Sunday school at 9 o'clock. We have adult Sunday schools, we have children and youth Sunday school classes available. Then following that, we have worship where we will sing praises, pray for one another, and listen to Bible study. Encourage you, that starts at 10:15. We are at 700 Sycamore Street in Monette, Missouri. Also on Wednesday nights, we have more small groups following a meal that starts at 5:30. We have men's group, women's group, single moms, children, and youth. Encourage you guys to come and join us. We believe it's very important to be actively involved in the body of Christ because here, you're family.